The Star Wars franchise never fails to surprise fans, whether it's on the screen or off it. In the most recent development, longtime Lucasfilms president Kathleen Kennedy is reportedly stepping down at the end of 2025 to pursue her retirement. The 71-year-old began as a producer in the early 1980s through her production company Amblin Entertainment, in collaboration with Steven Spielberg. Her producer credits throughout the 1980s into the 2000s are full of blockbuster films including Gremlins, The Goonies, the Back to the Future trilogy, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Cape Fear, Schindler's List, AI, Artificial Intelligence, Munich, and The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Fair to say, her producing career has founded her a wealth of success. However, in 2012, she joined Lucasfilms as co-chair alongside George Lucas, and was quickly promoted to president after he sold the company to Disney. Over the next 10 years, she would be responsible for revitalizing the franchise with blockbuster films, TV shows, comics, and video games. To put it kindly, her time as president is a mixed bag. To put it more harshly, her presidency has been a failure. On the one hand, she brought back the franchise after 10 years of dormancy. She has successfully expanded the franchise beyond the mainline story and has the biggest domestic box office ever under her belt in The Force Awakens. However, she has also been involved in quite a lot of failure. Yes, she is responsible for bringing the franchise back and overseeing its expansion. However, many of its expanded products have been maligned by fans, critics, or both. The Last Jedi is regarded as disrespectful to the franchise's main characters and story. Solo was the first time a Star Wars film ever lost money at the box office, and The Rise of Skywalker is disliked for digging into the past to fix the franchise's current mistake. Although it is certainly a major success for Kennedy that The Force Awakens was a major success at the box office, and the biggest ever domestically, on the other hand, any person who became president of Lucasfilms would have this success because the franchise was bound to have this major boom given its 20 years on ice. Ultimately, Kathleen Kennedy is an uber-successful producer, and she should be held in some regard for revitalizing the Star Wars franchise. But she has done so at a great cost. How many mega fans over the past 10 years have fallen out of love as a direct result of the franchise's expanded universe? Despite the major money that some of these products have made, there is no juice left in the Star Wars name. The franchise is currently a zombie, one that refuses to believe it's dead and continues to believe that if it just keeps going, it can turn it around eventually. However, really, all that anyone wants now is for someone to just put it out of its misery. So this is the news that appeared 2 days ago, I believe it is, on Tuesday night, for me here in the UK, that President of Lucasfilms, Kathleen Kennedy, is going to be leaving after around 13 years at the helm of one of the biggest production companies in the world. I wanted to use this as sort of a quick little video to discuss whether or not this is going to be a good thing for the franchise, or whether or not this is sort of just going to be the same old for the franchise. Spoiler alert, I don't think much is going to be changing. So I will say, before I get deeper into this, I'm not the biggest fan of Star Wars. The boat sort of kind of missed me as a kid. I never really got into it. As a kid, I was much more into Harry Potter, and now as an adult, I'm much more into Dune, and then just superheroes more generally. I think it's something about sci-fi. I've never really gelled with sci-fi very highly. I know I've just said Dune, but the point of Dune to me is that it's a fantasy world that just exists in the entire sort of universe. It's not really a sci-fi show. It's much more fantasy than anything, and that's the brilliance of Dune, is that it's fantasy and sci-fi. So what I would be hoping if I was a Star Wars fan, a bigger one than I am, is Kathleen Kennedy has often been seen as the poster woman, the poster child for Star Wars floundering in the 21st century, and of course not all of that is her. George Lucas has released 3 films in the 21st century that are Star Wars films, or maybe it's 2. I think maybe he released The Phantom Menace in 1999, and then Clone Wars and The Revenge of the Sith were early 2000s. I think that's correct. But I think in the 21st century, she's very much seen as the sort of poster child of why Star Wars has failed, which has been that it has focused more on expansion and selling merchandise and comics and toys and things like that than it has on the actual mainline story. It hasn't. It's something interesting with a lot of these companies, which is that they look at something like Star Wars, which is mega successful even in the 70s and 80s, and they go, oh, look at this, it sells toys, we need to do this more and more. And then rather than actually going, well, let's put together a good story, and then the products or the toys and the merchandise will sell as a result. They go, well, no, we need to sell the products first, and then the movie comes secondary. And I think it's almost like patronizing, I would say, to kids and teenagers and young adults that like, oh well, they'll buy it anyways because they love Star Wars. When they're buying it because they love Star Wars, they're not just buying it because it's Star Wars. The majority of these, fans are smarter than that. They're not just gonna go like, yeah, whatever, I'll just take whatever it is that you give me. And this expansion, in my opinion, has been hugely costly for the reputation of both Star Wars and I would say Disney as well, because Disney has become almost the evil empire of the Star Wars universe. Bob Iger is Darth Vader, and Kathleen Kennedy is, well, no, maybe actually that's the other way around. Bob Iger is Emperor Palpatine, and Kathleen Kennedy is Darth Vader, working like in conjunction to just destroy this once beloved franchise. And that is the crux of this issue, is that if you're a Star Wars fan going like, yay, Kathleen Kennedy is gone, we can like finally move on to this, that doesn't factor in the fact that Bob Iger has at minimum another 10, 11 months on his Disney contract. He still is probably going to choose who will lead Lucasfilms from now on. And even if it's not him, the guy who is, being interviewed for the next Disney CEO is Patrick Wilson, who runs EA. And don't get me wrong, Patrick Wilson is a brilliant businessman. He's brilliant at making money. He's brilliant at getting every last penny that he can out of franchises. But he's not a creative. He's not someone who is putting creatives in place for the best creative decisions. He's putting creatives in place who will maximize profit, who will go with the company line of profit over story, profit over characters, profit over, creativity, ultimately. And I don't think that this is as big of a win for Star Wars fans as they're probably hoping. I think that ultimately this is just a piece in a giant machine that is Disney, and that is now Disney Plus as well. If you wanted to have a success in sort of quote unquote taking control again over Star Wars, it would be a much bigger success, in my opinion, if Bob Iger had been replaced with, really, I don't know who. I don't think there are many creatives right now at the heads of a lot of these companies. But, actually, last week in my video I was talking about Barbara Broccoli. You need someone like Barbara Broccoli to take care of Disney. You need someone that is, Walt Disney-esque, that is Barbara Broccoli-esque, who is a true creative, who really cares about what they're doing. And currently, I don't think there are many people on the market like that who are running for like CEO positions. I think more than likely, I already think that Star Wars was starting to scale back its production of a lot of its products, of a lot of its TV shows, of a lot of its movies, because things like Solo, A Star Wars Story, The Acolyte, and then down to things like Skeleton Crew, they aren't being received very well. Now, for Solo, A Star Wars Story, and for The Acolyte, from everything that I've read about them, It's just that they're not very good. But Skeleton Crew, from what I've seen on Rotten Tomatoes, or tomatoes, however you pronounce it, tomato, that is better. But Star Wars is so dead in the water now because it's had so many duds of TV shows and movies that no one watched the Skeleton Crew, and Star Wars needs to pull back and it needs to refocus on what actually is it going forward. And whilst Bob Iger did say that things like Marvel need to pull back, that a lot of their big franchises need to pull back and sort of refocus, I don't think he's a smart enough visionary to really go, okay, well, if we're pulling back, that also means we need to refocus and, re-envision what Star Wars is to a modern audience. And they attempted, in some respect, with Kathleen Kennedy in particular, to make Star Wars more diverse, to make it more open, or at least on a surface level, be more open to a lot of different demographics. That has failed in many respects. I think the biggest failure of Kathleen Kennedy's presidency, in my opinion, well, if you're talking off the screen, has been the lasting effect of John Boyega's exit. The way that he has continuously said that he believes that Disney and Lucasfilms have essentially been racist and have maligned him because he is a black man, and because he believed that a white woman in Daisy Ridley was more profitable and was more marketable than him. I think that there is a lasting effect of him coming out and saying those things, and him coming out and saying those things very loudly. And I think that the biggest failure of Kathleen Kennedy has been to not control that narrative and to squash those rumours by, saying this isn't true. John Boyega is at the centre of our franchise, because he was clearly at the centre of the franchise when that first Force Awakens trailer came out, and then they switched narratives. Now, a lot of the theories about that is that a lot of people believe that, Daisy Ridley is more marketable to a Chinese audience than John Boyega, and there seems to be some evidence in that, because the posters for the Western audiences, had John Boyega as the pivot, whereas the Chinese poster had Daisy Ridley as the pivot. And so I can't really say why that is. I can't really say if that is even true. I'm just putting it out there that I know that theory is out there. And so whoever comes in needs to re-envision what Star Wars is on the screen, but it also needs to provide somewhat of a plan of how you regain the Star Wars audience's trust, whether that's the hardcore audience or even the casuals, because I don't think that Acolyte was particularly well received by anyone. And as I says in the write-up, Solo, a Star Wars story, just wasn't watched by anyone. So this is a major job that someone is going to have, whoever it is who comes in next. But I'm not hopeful. I wouldn't be positive about this just because a cog in the machine has left, because nothing else in that machine has actually changed. As recently as last year, and late last year at that, Disney was still focused on sequels and franchise expansions, or even this year actually, because they've had that Captain America movie that came out, and I haven't watched that, and it looks terrible, or it's getting terrible reviews, and I think that trailer just looks a bit bland, to be honest. And late last year, it had Moana 2 that came out, it had Inside Out 2 that came out in the summer, and if I'm being honest, I only saw Inside Out 2 out of any of those three, and I thought Inside Out 2 was pretty boring as well, because it's very much the same thing. I know it made a lot of money, which, alright, fair enough. It was a success. So was Moana 2, in fairness, but Captain America wasn't. It has had terrible returns at the box office. So this, in my opinion, if you're wanting a change with Star Wars, there is a lot more that needs to change before anything is actually going to change. I think that what is more than likely is that they're just going to slow down the franchise, and that maybe they'll focus on one movie every 2 years, one movie a year, and just no TV shows. But I didn't include it in my write-up, but there have been numerous trilogies that have been announced, and then, oh, we're not doing that. Which, again, doesn't bode very well. The one person who might be able to save this internally at Disney, and this isn't what people want to hear, but Kevin Feige, maybe, but that is still going to come with some losses on the fan side of it, because he's still going to want to turn that into an expanded universe, because that's sort of his bread and butter. That's what he does. So yeah, I don't have much more to say on this. I was much more interested on this topic about the business side of this. I wasn't particularly interested on, sort of the fan perspective, just because I'm not a fan of this franchise, which I know is blasphemy in some circles, but it just never connected with me, and I think that's fine. But yeah, I wanted to sort of throw some water on the fire if there's anyone out there who is, looking at this and going, wow, this means like Star Wars is about to change. I really don't think so. And until Bob Iger leaves and you get someone else in there, I don't think you can hope for much change at all. And even when he does leave, I would be skeptical about who comes in next, because Disney ultimately has, for years, probably decades now, has decided that its profit margins mean more than its creativity. And I understand that when you're at the pinnacle of Hollywood, you're the biggest company in the history of Hollywood. You own like 50% of the industry. But it doesn't make it any less disappointing to see, I would say. And it's not going to, sort of help Star Wars fans to go, oh, well, Marvel have this. Oh, well, the animated films are all the same as well. That doesn't help them to know that. That just makes them even more sad that George Lucas sold it in the first place, when you could clearly see what was going on with Disney's other properties. But yeah, anyways, that's the end of this video. Thank you for watching. Have a good day. Bye.